So we're going to talk about soldering and what not to use when making jewelry. This is the most frequent question I get is what do I use to solder stuff together? Can I use basically silver solder or electrical solder to do this and a soldering iron? Or do I need a torch? Or can I use a butane torch or propane? And I'm going to go over all that now. So if you're making jewelry that you want to last and guarantee it's not going to fall apart, do not use a soldering iron and silver electrical solder or plumbing solder or anything like that. Just don't use this at all. So now, when it comes to everything else, here's what I use and what you should also be using for the most part to solder any type of jewelry. So these are sheets of solder, and each one has a marking in it that tells you what it is. So that one was hard, this one is medium, easy, and extra easy. So what that means is each one of these has a different melting point. So hard is the highest melting point, and extra easy is the easiest one to melt. So you can use variations of these to make your work. And the reason for all the different types of solder is if you soldered something with, say, hard, and you want to add something to it, you don't want the hard solder to flow again, so you use the next one down, which is medium. And say if you want to solder something else onto that, you can go to easy or extra easy. But using this, you need to get over 1,000 degrees just to melt this. So there's no soldering iron that's going to do that. So you're going to need a torch. When it comes to your torch setup, it really just depends on your space and how much money you have to spend on a torch. So you're really going to need a torch, and that all depends on, so you're really going to need a torch, and what torch setup you get really depends on how much money you have to spend on a torch, your space and ventilation, and your comfort. So I personally use this Smith's little torch for almost everything, and this is one of the more expensive ways to go, because just this torch right here is over $100 or $150 depending where you find it. The little stand here is about $35, and then you have to get the tanks refilled and get the tanks in general. So all in all, it's like a $600 setup just to get this going. But it has the highest heat output, it has multiple heads for different thicknesses, and you can get additional ones like this rosebud that will allow you to melt metal in a crucible. So it kind of pays for itself to have if you can afford to do it. But if you don't plan on doing anything that needs this much heat, or making your own wire, or making your own sheet metal, or just melting things in general, you probably don't need this. So that's where we come in with a propane torch, which these are found at normal local hardware stores. And they also have MAP gas, which actually is hotter than this, and a lot of people like to use that because it gets hot enough to melt metals. But I use propanes, and this all depends on the tip you have right here. So this one has a starter, but it has a weird kind of bushy torch end, when this one has a more to a point basically torch. So I prefer to use this one to solder things and heat particular areas, and this one just to anneal. And these can be had for about $20 for this full setup. This is the most expensive part. These are a couple bucks to get a new one, and you refill them every so often. Or if you're doing just little jump rings or little soldering jobs, you can just get a what is this? A butane torch, and it'll work perfectly fine for you. They run anywhere from $10 up to $50 for this, and it's refillable. So you're going to need flux also, and this is very important to get high temperature flux. There's a lot of low temp flux that you use with soldering stuff. So kind of like this, and this will not work at all. It'll burn off well before it does anything. These are actually meant for doing jewelry, and I personally use Handy Flux for almost everything. It's a paste like that I just add a little bit of water to when I put it into a different container to make it a little bit more soupy so it goes where I want it. So this will basically keep your piece clean as it's heating, and solder will not flow or move or do anything on a dirty surface. So you have to use these whenever you're soldering with the actual jewelry grade solder. This particular one I have used a lot in the past, but I kind of stopped once I got the Handy Flux. This is better for gold because it doesn't last as long, I feel, or in my experience, as the Handy Flux does. So if you're heating a piece that has a lot of different solder pieces on it, you're probably going to have to go back and fix it a little bit because this will burn off quicker than this will, just in my experience. So there's not only sheets of solder like this that you can use. You can actually buy these already cut into little pieces that are about 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. And you could do it that way. Or you can use a solder paste that is basically a high temperature solder turned into a paste. My problem with this is this dries out over time if you don't use it, and will basically get old and not really work the same anymore. So keep that in mind if you do order any of these. And you also buy it in a wire that you can cut down and just buy it by the foot and cut off what you need. So once you cut these, you really don't know what they are anymore because, as we saw, these have markings on them, and I keep tags on other ones. But if they're cut up into little pieces, you're going to want to get a separator or containers for each one, and that's what I use. So my top one is my extra easy solder that is now all over the place. So I cut them into these little pieces and put them into this container. And each one of these levels is a different kind of solder. So extra easy, easy, medium, and hard. And then at the very bottom I have gold solder, which is kind of hard to see, but this is 14 karat gold solder, and this is medium, and then the one underneath it is 14 karat hard. So you can get it in different colors to match whatever you're working on. So when it comes to soldering copper, a lot of people ask me, how do I get rid of this solder line here? And can I just get copper colored? And yes and no. In my experience, I haven't found anything that will 100% hide this line just by using a different type of solder. They have some that are more of a yellow tone, and they have some that say that they're copper colored but end up being a really light color, just like if you use silver solder. So what you can do, if you really don't like this, is clean it up as much as possible so you have the smallest line, and then you can coat this entire thing by plating it in copper, and it will get rid of the line, or at least the visibility of the line. Or if this was a bezel, all the way around the bottom would have a little bit of silver. So if you plated the whole thing, it would cover that up, and then you should be good to go. So when cutting my solder sheets, I just use a pair of tin snips. There are other tools that are meant for doing this, but I don't have them, and this seems to be the easiest way for me to do it. So basically I just cut off a little strip, like so, and then open up my container and take my 10 snips and just cut little pieces. And just be careful not to pinch your fingers because it will cut your fingers really easily. So yeah, as you can see, I have a bunch of little pieces now for soldering. And that's why I keep so many different sheets of solder. And they go a long way, these little squares. So I know this video was pretty short and sweet, and just going over basically don't use electrical solder or plumbing solder or anything like that, or a soldering iron to make jewelry. But the reason why I'm addressing this is I get maybe 20 to 30 emails or questions a week asking if they can use this with their jewelry, and I have to tell them basically no, use all this. So I can also use this video to explain it, and for anyone that's looking and sees this, they'll know that this is the stuff that you're going to want, not this. So thank you for watching my video, and if you liked it, feel free to leave a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave a comment below. And if you would like to be updated every time I post a new video, subscribe to my channel. I try to put out a new video every week. Well, thank you for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye.